All right, a kind of random video here about the joys of Dojo Sweeper. What is Dojo Sweeper? It's basically a Minesweeper clone that I made. It's on my GitHub. There'll be a link in the description. If you're not familiar with Minesweeper, it's this very old game where you click on squares and there's numbers, and that's how many bad squares are nearby, and you're supposed to mark all the bad squares and left click on all the good squares. This is from like the 90s or something. It's very old. But also I really hate the UI. Because you've got all these gray tiles, and then when you reveal a tile, well, it's still a gray color, so it's not very I don't like the aesthetics of it. I also don't like the colored numbers. So I made Dojo Sweeper to be a little bit different. So the unrevealed tiles are this beige kind of color, tan, I don't know. Sand might be a good way to describe the color. And then you left click and you get these green tiles, and then when you right click to mark them, they're a nice red color that has a pretty good contrast, unless maybe if you're like red-green colorblind, then maybe this isn't the game for you. Yeah. But anyways, so I've got 4 difficulty levels on here. It starts off on difficulty level 2, which is approximately equal to the beginner difficulty on Minesweeper. 3 is about the same as intermediate difficulty, and 4 is slightly easier than the expert difficulty of Minesweeper. That's just those just determine how many of the bad squares there are. So like I said earlier, I think I said earlier, we want to left click the good squares, right click the bad squares. These numbers will go down, and you want them to both to go down to 0, and then you win the game. So on the starting difficulty here, you see we got 12 bad squares, then we have 16, then we have 20 on the highest difficulty here. If we were to go to because some people get intimidated even on the starting difficulty of Minesweeper, I have added this extra difficulty of 1, which only has 8 bad squares. So yeah. Let's look at how we play Minesweeper, or how we play Dojo Sweeper. So like I said earlier, usually you left click a square to start off with. You're just guessing, of course, and then you look at all these numbers and you say, what do these numbers tell me about where a bad square could be? Oh yeah, I wanted to test this little drawing software stuff. So let's look at, for example, this number 1 right here. Now, a square can have all touching squares, like all adjacent squares, including diagonals, are where a bad square could be. but these bottom ones are off the board, of course. So if you see here, we've got this one here, and the only spot where a bad square could be is right here. So we will just right click it, and now that bad square is marked. And then we go again. We look to find a square that's got to be a bad square. So we look at this one. You can obviously tell that one and this one. So there's obviously these two squares are gonna be bad squares, so let's just mark those. And now if we go up here, I really need a better hotkey for switching out of this drawing mode, but so obviously we can tell for this square or for this square that this one's got to be a bad square. So let's mark that one. And now we have, we can do this on some other ones, of course, still. But what we want to look at right now is right here. All right, this one right here. So this one can only have one bad square next to it. And we already know that there's a bad square right here. So that means that all the other squares that the one is attached to, in this case it's just this one right here, all the other ones have to be safe squares that we can just freely left click, because they're 100% guaranteed to be safe. So, well, unless of course you accidentally marked a square that's safe. So you do have to be careful about that. You don't lose the game for marking a safe square, but you do lose the game if you left click a bad square. But let me also, so we were looking at this square, but we can also look at this square. So the same thing is, we've got this one bad square, and that means that all the other squares attached to the one are safe. So we can actually reveal both these two squares just by knowing that one bad square is there. So let's do that. We will left click and left click. So yeah, that's the most basics of Minesweeper. Is you right click a square that has to be bad, and that will end up telling you that in most cases that some nearby squares have to be good, which in turn gives you more information about where more bad squares are going to be. So I'll right click this one in the corner here. It's a very common thing that you'll see is whoops, when you are looking at a diagonal. I messed that up. Let me actually unmark that square for a second here. Okay. So it's a common thing you'll see is there will be this area of unrevealed tiles, and then in the corner you'll just have this number 1. So it's a very common thing to see that this one has to be a bad square. Now you got to be careful. There could be like a bad one up here somewhere that one is still touching. You gotta make sure you don't accidentally have a situation like that and this square is actually a safe square. But in general, you can be pretty confident about these squares in the corner being bad ones. So we've got that, which means this one's safe. This means that those are safe. Also means those are safe. And I forgot to mention, if there's no nearby bad squares, like we saw at the start of the game, then the large amounts of the board can be like chain revealed automatically for you. But yeah. So we get a nice job. We won the game in this case. So that's really all you have to do to beat the easier difficulty. And if we go to difficulty 2, it's actually very similar. There's 50% more bad squares, but it's still not a lot. We can go here. That's safe. I'm showing you like more like a regular play speed. So, and then we've got, hang on. I need a faster hotkey to get in and out of this drawing tool. Whoops. That's not the button I wanted. So then we've got here on this diagonal, this 2 tells us that that one's a bad square. So we got that going on. Got a bad square here. Let's go back to my rectangle. So in this case, we have a situation where this 2 has 2 bad squares next to it, so it's complete. So that's how we know that this square has to be safe. So these things become a little less obvious in some cases when you're looking at numbers higher than 1. But we can see here number... Hang on. Back to the drawing tool. Whoops. What do we want? We could look at this 5. There's other ways we can figure out if these squares are safe or not. But if we look at this 5, there's 2 bad squares, and then there's 3 unrevealed squares. So we actually know that all 3 of these have to be bad squares to get that total number of 5. So we just mark all 3 of those, and we continue looking at things. So this 2 is complete. This 1 can only be here. This 1 can only be here. This 1 can only be here. This 2 is complete. This 2 is complete. This 2 is complete. This 3 is complete. This 1's actually complete. This one's complete. And now this one's got to be a bad square. You can also, when you're getting near the end of the game, just look at the total number of remaining bad squares in the corner. And that goes down every time you mark a square. So if you do accidentally mark a safe square, then that could mislead you. So be careful. But yeah, we can also just look at the numbers on here and say, oh, that's got to be a bad square. But there are times where the remaining number of bad squares gives you information where otherwise you would be guessing. So, yeah, difficulty 2, pretty much the same as difficulty 1. Nothing fancy need to do. Once you get to difficulty 3, this is where Minesweeper, I think, starts to actually become fun. So, one thing you may have noticed already, or maybe you didn't, and I'm kind of giving away one of the secrets of Minesweeper, but I think this is fairly obvious, is you've got this certain number of bad squares on the board. Now, if you randomly choose to reveal, well, any square on the board is going to have the same chances of it being a bad square. But if you choose to left click on a square in the center of the board somewhere, there are 8 adjacent squares where a bad square could be. So what happens is we click on that square. Okay, there's 4 nearby bad squares. So this does not tell us much in the way of helpful information. Even if it's a 1 in the square, you're still guessing as to where a safe square might be. So what I would say is, instead of there being 8 potential spots for a bad square to be, what you want to do, in my opinion, the best strategy is always start by guessing in a corner. Because in a corner, there's only 3 squares where you could have a bad square. So the corner has the maximum chance of not having any adjacent bad squares. So it'll have the maximum chance of revealing a section of the board, as opposed to like being a 0, basically. Or maybe a blank would be the right way to say it, as opposed to having a number on it. So we are going to start here in the corner. If we get a number here, then we know, if we were to guess, the chances are not so great of us winning if we try to guess in one of these spots. So we'll guess in another corner, see how we do. So then we're good for a little bit. We can figure out a bunch of things, and yeah. Let's see. That's a 3. That one's done. We got that there. And this 4 is done. This 3 is done. So this 2 is going to require that, which means that's got to be safe for that other one, and this and that. And just go on going through the numbers, figuring out what's gotta be one way or the other. And eventually this is why difficulty 3 is, or also called the intermediate difficulty, essentially, of Minesweeper. This is why this is such a big difference from difficulty. The easier difficulty is you will much more frequently get these situations where you can't figure out. I shouldn't say you can't figure out. I should say the right way to say this. Where you'll get these situations where there are no squares such that they obviously have to be one way or the other. So if we were to look at, for example, this 1 here, it's got 2 possibilities where it could be. And then if we look at this 2 here, it's already got 1 here. So it could have 1 in either of these 2 other squares, the same as this 1. And so it's like, okay, we don't have enough information there. And then if we look at this 2, well, it's got 1 already, so it could have 1 here or here. And then if we look at this 2, it's got 1 already. So any of these 3, 1 out of 3 could be 1. And I think you see the pictures that we don't have anything left that we can definitely eliminate from the very simplest of rules of Minesweeper. There's no single square that's touching one number that like either has to be safe or has to be a bad square. So we got to go a little bit more creative. So this is like I was saying, this is really where Minesweeper gets good. Just to keep your brain thinking from a logical perspective. You'll see guides out there on Minesweeper that are like, hey, if there's this pattern and you see this pattern and then you know that this square is safe and that square is bad and whatever. I don't look at the patterns at all. It's that's a boring way to play in my opinion. So what we're gonna look at is this 2 here. We know there's got to be 1 here or here. Now let's look at let me actually get a different color. Let's go blue. All right. So we got the red 2. That could be one of those 2 squares, and we got the blue 2. That could be one of these 3 squares. You'll see this a lot with 1s as well. In this case, we have it with 2s, but each of these 2s already have 1 marked square that they're next to, so they only need 1 remaining square. So yeah, so that's what we're looking at. If we were to there's kind of two ways that you can approach this. One of them is, what if we were to mark this square? Then let me see, go to this color. All right. Then these two squares absolutely would have to be safe, because this 2 would be complete. But then what that means is there is, whoops. If that were true, then that would mean this could not possibly be a 2, because it would only have one bad square next to it. So, because of that, that square cannot possibly be a bad square. Absolutely 100% has to be safe. Now, the other way to look at this is what I was trying to draw before. Let's see. Back to my drawing mode here. So we've got these two squares. One of them has to be a bad square. Now, if we look at this 2, it only needs one more. Let me put a box around this one. So because of that, because of the red 2, one of those two squares has to be a bad square. Now, the blue 2 only needs one more square. So what that tells us is, because there has to be a bad one up here, that bad one will complete this 2, which means all other squares that the 2 is touching have to be safe. So again, we're at the point where approaching it from a different way of looking at things, that this square 100% has to be safe. So once we've determined that that's safe, it may or may not give us enough information to directly find more good squares and bad squares. In this case, it definitely helps. We're going to actually look at something a little less common, but very, very awesome when you do come across it, which is, here, let me draw this properly. All right. So we've got ourselves a 2 here. It's got one bad square already. That means that this square or this square is going to be a bad one. And then if we go to look at this 1 here, also another rectangle. If either of those has to be, if one of those has to be a bad square, then that tells us all 3 of these other squares the one is touching, guaranteed 100% to be safe. So let's reveal those. Left click, left click, left click. So that's the kind of logic that you gotta start looking at if you want to be winning on the difficulty level 3. So you can still win a few games if you just get lucky and the board's pretty simple, or if you just make guesses in these situations where you don't realize that you can logically figure out some things. But yeah, if you want to be winning at Minesweeper more, it's all about the logic of looking at how the numbers relate to each other and figuring out what more do they tell you other than, oh, there's got to be one here or here. So, like we have, again, a similar situation to what we had up here. We've got a 2 that's got to be here or here. We've got a 2 here that's got to be here, here, or here. But that means that we got a spot right here that's got to be safe because we know there's going to be one in the other 2 slots. So lots and lots of the same stuff. And yeah. Well, here's a good one. So let's go back to drawing mode here. And we've got this one in the corner. Let me get a line here. So one of these has to be bad. And then we've got a 2. Right, drawing tool for this. Meant to be on the red color. So then we got this 2 here. And with this 2 out of these 3 slots have to be bad ones. But because of the 1 on the bottom, we know that only one of these slots, of these bottom slots, can be a bad one. Because if they were both a bad one, then that would be a 2. And this would be a 3 down here. So, because only one of them can be a bad one, that means this 2's other bad one has to be this top slot. And that, in turn, gives us information where this 2's complete, and then that means that's got to be bad. This 1's complete, and now to complete this 2 over here, we got to be that one, and then that's good. And then now we are down to the last 4 squares here. Now these 4 squares are a problem you'll run into kind of often if you play a lot of Minesweeper. Or I should say Dojo Sweeper. Now if you play on bigger boards, you often may not even get this far. So it's kind of like saying you'll run into it often is kind of hard to gauge exactly how often. But you'll get this kind of situation a lot where you have on one side, there's got to be one there or there. That's for the 2 here. To complete that 2, one of those has to be a bad square. And then if we look at this 1 here, One of those has to be a bad square. And if we look at, let's see, another color here. Whoops. Circle this 3. If we look at this 3 here, it's got 2 bad squares next to it already. So again, it tells us only that one of those bottom 2 have to be a bad one. So there's when you have this last 4 squares thing, it's actually very important to look at the remaining number of bad squares. We don't have enough information from these numbers to figure out if these last bad squares are going to be, which ones are going to be safe and which ones are going to be bad. So we look at the number up here. There are 2 bad squares remaining. This is a problem. If there's 1 bad square remaining, then we know that the bad square has to be here to satisfy the 2 and the 3 and the 1. Basically both sides of this square. But if there's 2 bad squares, it can be here and here, or the bad squares can be here and here. And it's just a complete guess in this case of which one it is. It's just a 50-50 guess. So yeah. Bad luck for us this time. Getting stuck with this. Yes, but sometimes that's the way it is. So I'm gonna guess here. And we got lucky. So we win. So yeah. Difficulty 4 is just like difficulty 3, but you're gonna win a lot less, and you're gonna rack your brain a lot more. Lost on the first move there. You're gonna rack your brain a lot more trying to figure out if there's anything you can possibly do to win. So you can see here, I've revealed all the corners. I'm not looking in a great spot so far, but we can mark that. And we can also mark this. And we can also mark this. And now we got something that we can actually work with here. So we'll see if we can get somewhere with that. Looking pretty good. Go here. We go here. Let's go here. That's safe. That's a bad one. That's complete. That's complete. That's complete. That's a bad one. Those are complete. That and that. That. I'm trying to go sort of quick, so I might end up making a mistake here, but looking pretty good so far. Down to 3 bad ones, 4 good ones. All right. Let's go into drawing mode real quick. So what I'm looking at now, let me actually just go to the hand drawing. So we got this one's gonna be here. This one has to have 2 of the 3. but only one can be in the top two, so it's one of those situations where you can tell the bottom one has to be a bad one. In that case, it completes this one here. So that tells us that, which then tells us this, and that tells us that, and that tells us that, and that one's safe. So there we go. That's how we win on all the difficulties of Minesweeper, Dojo Sweeper. You can definitely make the board bigger if you want. You can make the board taller also, but the way I have the recording set up, it's gonna go off the screen, and that's not great for gameplay per se. So it's all, each difficulty, it's all the same density of bad squares, no matter how big the board you make it, how big you make the board. So whatever you feel like playing, but I generally just stick with 10 by 10 unless I really want to go for the challenge of completing the biggest size board. So yeah, Minesweeper, you just click things. Yeah. So here we are once again in a situation where we are kind of stuck actually this time. Yeah, I think we're technically stuck right here where we can't actually figure anything out from this. We have to guess. So at this point, when you're on these harder difficulties, you absolutely have to guess. Look at the numbers, try to figure out a couple things. Is what's the odds of the spot that you're guessing is going to be correct? I should say, what's the odds of the spot that you're guessing is going to be safe? You always guess with a safe left click because you can right click anywhere and it doesn't like actually do anything. So you're always going to guess with a left click. But it's up to you to try to figure out what's going to be your highest chance of success, and also what's going to be the odds of your correct guess giving you enough information that you can stop guessing after that. Because if you have to keep guessing, then your odds of winning the game go down very quickly. So in this case, we got a 2 that needs one more, so that's a 1 in 3 chance. We've got this 2, which needs one more, so that's a 1 in 3. And we've got this 3 that needs one more, so that's a 1 in 4 chance of losing if you were to guess in there. But you got to kind of consider these other ones, that it's kind of a 1 in 3 kind of thing. I don't know how exactly the odds work out on that, but you look at that and you say, okay, maybe I do make a guess in there, but maybe that doesn't give me a number that's gonna tell me enough to make another choice, and you'll just have to guess anyways. So that can be an unfortunate situation, but you could also look at this as, okay, if I make a guess in a corner over here, then I've got like a 1 in 5 chance of losing, as opposed to like a 1 in 3 or a 1 in 4 chance of losing. So you can try that. And then you'll be like, oh, okay. We got some information. Not a lot of information, because that's about it that we can safely do without having to do a guess again. But it worked out better than guessing up here probably would. So try corner again. Now we're at a 1 in 3. And it could be bad. At this point, I like to guess down here usually. Let me draw out why. So we guess here. Whoops. Let me put a 1 here. So if we guess here, and this is a 1, because of the 1 here, we know there has to be 1 in there. So if that turns out to be a 1, then all 3 of these squares are guaranteed safe squares. So that's why I like guessing that square in this situation. Is if it is the correct guess, it gives us potentially a good amount of information. And it's still a better odds of than trying to do like a 1 in 3 guess or something. So there we go. We got lucky. It's exactly a 1, so we know those are all good. And because of this other one here, we also know that those are good as well. And so on and so on. We slowly get ourselves more and more information. Oh, here's a good one. Now that we revealed, go back to drawing mode here. We're looking at this 2 here. Since we revealed that stuff down there, and then if we look at this 1 here, draw that a little better. Look at this 1 here. The 1 has to have. Maybe I should have done the rectangle for the 1. So the 1 has to have one there or there. Which means for this 2, that tells us there has to be a bad one there. So lots of little things like this that slowly add up to you hopefully winning the game. But at some point, you'll get unlucky and your guess will be wrong and you lose. Don't feel bad about it. It happens. Yeah. Not sure if I really want to finish. Whoops. Playing this game on this recording because it's becoming a very long video. But we look at that 2 there. Same deal as before. where we know either one of these two squares has to be a bad one. So that two will actually be completed by that. So because of that, because of that, we know that square has to be safe. And now that we've got a 1 next to that square, then we can reveal a good amount more of the board, and that will really tell us the more useful stuff, which is great. I'm gonna count here, making sure I don't mess up my counting. So yeah, got some stuff going on over here. Got, and I made a mistake. Yeah. So I wasn't looking carefully enough. It happens. Let's see. So I was looking at this 2, and we had a square over here and the 1 right here. And I was thinking, oh, that one's got to be a bad one because of this 2. And then, oops. Let me change colors here. Something with better contrast. Try this one. I feel like that's too light. Hard to see. So yeah. My mind was focused up here, and I thought, oh, this 2 needs that one right there. But it had this one already. So I accidentally marked that square as a bad one when it was a safe one. And that caused me to think the 3 was complete, and then I clicked the bad square and lost the game. So, like I said, it happens. You make mistakes. You can try to play the game slower and avoid those mistakes, but I try not to like really overthink things that much, so it's more towards the end of the game where, especially on a bigger board, where I'm trying harder to actually win the game, where I'll slow down a bit. But yeah, lots of thinking in Minesweeper or Dojo Sweeper, and that's what I like about it. As opposed to a lot of other games, they're not really about thinking, they're about getting you on this, into this habit of playing them so that you spend more money on them and blah blah blah. It's not a fun experience for me. So obviously I have a lot of video game videos on my main YouTube channel. I do love video games, but haven't been enjoying them too much lately. Been spending more time just building things, which will slowly make their way onto GitHub and onto my YouTube Wogrim, what did I call it? Wogrim Makes channel, something like that. I really should know that. Yeah. Anyways, ending the video here. Have a nice day.